What is going on, guys? Christian from the Land Prey MMA podcast, coming to you with a recap from UFC 272, headlined by Colby Covington and Jorge Gamebrad Mosfidal. It was a fantastic fight card. I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was some fights that we'll discuss here, some fights that I picked wrong. Most of the fights I believe I picked right on, but we'll break down each one. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, comment. It helps with the algorithm. And then hit that notification bell anytime that or anytime that I post or upload a new video. You guys will be notified. So that way you guys can see whenever we're putting out new videos. I'm going to try to put out 1 or 2 videos a week, just because I think for a little bit I'm going to be running this solo while Jeffrey and Trenton are doing their own things. So, yeah. And then if you're listening to us in podcast platform, Pocket Cast, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other type of podcast platform, thank you so much. Make sure to check out our YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to check out our podcast. Yeah, so let's get into the early prelims. One of the fights that I had talked about was the Tim Elliott versus Ulanbekov. And I thought that with Tim Elliott, he's just one of those guys that's, inconsistent. I know that he's really good and his record doesn't really show how good of a fighter he actually is. Obviously, we got to see him on The Ultimate Fighter, where he won The Ultimate Fighter and was able to get a title shot against Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. And he actually put Mighty Mouse in some pretty dangerous positions with submissions. But since then, he's kind of been up and down. Win one, lose one, win one, lose two, win one. So I was thinking that it was going to be more of the same, where we're just going to see a lot of inconsistencies. But Tim Elliott, he really showed out. He had a phenomenal fight. There was some instances where you're like, okay, this could be kind of a toss-up. We just don't know what's going to happen. But I think he was able to put on a good enough performance. Obviously, he got the decision win. And who knows what's going to happen. He's out there with James Krause, and James Krause is arguably one of the top rising coaches in the fight game, especially for the UFC. And I think if he can get back to winning and being consistent with his wins, he'll definitely get a title shot before his tenure with the UFC is up. That being said, obviously he's fought with the UFC before, got cut, and then came back after winning the Ultimate Fighter. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does. Flyweight division is pretty stacked. So hopefully he can get another good 1 or 2 fights, maybe get a finish in there, and work his way up to the top 10. Headlining the early prelims was Brian Kelleher versus Umar Nurmagomedov, which is the cousin of Khabib. And Umar absolutely put it on Brian Kelleher that whole fight. He pushed the pace. He did the stereotypical Dagestani thing and pushed the pace. He was the one who brought it to Brian the entire fight, and then was able to get the submission, which I honestly thought was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be a submission finish or if it was just going to be ground and pound or just dominance for 3 rounds. But he was able to get the first round submission. Kicking off the not the early prelims, but the preliminary card was in the women's flyweight division, which was Marina Moroz versus Maria Agapova. And Marina Moroz, first off, shout out to her. She's Ukrainian, and she ended up getting the win with a head and arm choke, like a arm triangle, and she had a beautiful post-fight speech. And essentially, was saying that she didn't want her family to be killed and all this other stuff. So it was awesome for her to get the win, especially during such a trying time right now. And I think her and Maria actually were there was kind of like a rivalry there. So it was good for her to get that win in a dominating fashion, and she was able to, have the time to speak her mind in terms of like what's going on with this Ukraine and Russia thing. So I'm really glad she picked up that win. That was huge for her. One of the fights that I watched and I just was unsure about was Kennedy and Zeshukwu. I'm gonna butcher his name. Sorry, buddy. And Nikolai Nigmareno. Nigmarenu. I don't know how to properly pronounce these guys' last names. They're hard. Obviously, Nikolai was at a disadvantage with the height and the reach, but he was able to get in close. He landed some good strikes, and at one point, Kennedy got deducted a point for eye poke. I believe he got deducted a point for an eye poke. And for me, I thought Kennedy did enough to win, or at least make it a draw. They didn't see it that way, and Nikolai got the win. And some of the stuff that I was reading on Twitter, just like people's reactions and some of the stuff that I saw, Kennedy has all the potential to be like a top guy in the light heavyweight division, but he does not, like, he is lengthy, he's fast, he's strong. He could be one of the top contenders at 205 if he just put it all together and didn't hesitate. He doesn't pull the trigger enough, and I think it went against him in this fight because I think he could have had Nikolai in a lot of dangerous positions, and he just didn't pull the trigger. He didn't throw enough. He outstruck Nikolai, but the biggest difference was, the eye poke was one thing, and then he gave up a takedown. So it's just one of those things where, get back to the drawing board, change some things up, and hopefully we'll see him out there. I would say probably within the next year or two, he'd probably be in the top 10 if he can kind of figure it out and get a little bit more consistent with pushing the pace, the pressure, and then throwing volume. In the women's strawweight division, Marina Rodriguez versus Yan Zhao Nan. I think this was a title eliminator because you had number 3 versus number 4 in Marina Rodriguez and Yan Zhao Nan. And Marina looked phenomenal. She ended up winning the fight. But the biggest thing in this was, even with the takedowns that Yan got, it didn't really change anything in terms of the outcome. I thought that it was going to be closer, just because I feel like Jan's a better striker, and she pushes the pace. But Marina is smart. She's been at the top for a little bit, and I think she'll probably end up getting the next title shot, or she should, after Carlos Esparza. I couldn't remember who it was. Carlos Esparza. So, good for Marina Rodriguez. That was a big win. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over this next year in the strawweight division, just because I think Rose and Carlos Esparza are scheduled to fight at some point this year. Headlining the preliminary card was Jaylen Turner versus Jamie Malarkey. And Jaylen Turner looked so good. He is going to be so dangerous in the lightweight division for the next couple years. He's looked absolutely sensational. The biggest thing was he got taken down in the first round by Jamie, and Jamie had a little bit of control. I can't remember how much time specifically, but Jaylen was able to piece him up on the feet and was able to put him away within the first minute of the second round. Made it to the second round, and then Jaylen just put it on him. And it was a good fight. I think one thing for Jaylen, he needs to just work on his ground game a little bit more, work on his wrestling. And then, who knows, he could be in the top 10 before the year's over, depending on how many fights he gets. Because we're in March, he'd probably get one in July, or June or July, and then another one before the year's over. And then depending on who he fights, he could be in the top 10. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's a beast. Just jump into the main card because that was the headline the Jaylen Turner fight was headliner of the preliminaries. Kicking off was heavyweight Sergei Spivak versus Greg Hardy. I made it known in the last episode my thoughts on Greg Hardy. I could give two shits less. I will never pick him. Even if I know he's going to win the fight, I'm never going to pick his ass because I just don't condone the behavior that he had while he was in the NFL, the things that he did with his ex, and obviously I believe people should get second chances, but stuff like that with domestic violence and all that other stuff, nope, doesn't work for me. He was an ass on the football field. He was a complete dick when he played for the Panthers, and he was cocky. And then coming into the UFC, he gave himself the nickname Prince of War. And it's like, okay, that's a terrible, terrible nickname. Especially for him. The guy's 7-5, and really he hasn't beaten anybody worth mentioning. Got starched by Tai Tuivasa, and then he started talking shit about Derek Lewis, and it's like, dude, Derek Lewis would whoop the shit out of you. Okay, getting back on track. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on Greg Hardy. I just don't like him, and I don't condone his behavior, and I don't think that a guy like that should get spotlight in the UFC. And hopefully his contract was up. I hope that experiment is over. I hope they don't re-sign him. I hope that he doesn't make a bunch of money and he has to fight in like fucking no, I don't even know. I hope he fights in like the indies of MMA in terms of my professional wrestling fans that I have out there. Okay, back on track. Sergei Spivak, he was able to put Greg Hardy away in the first round. He got hit with a vicious low kick. Greg Hardy's legs are stout, and he landed a really good low kick. And I was like, oh shit, this could be a problem if it goes, all 3 rounds. But Sergei was able to get in close, landed some good shots, dropped Greg, and then was able to finish him with some good ground and pound. There's a lot of stuff that I saw on Twitter, which is basically like Brett Okamoto from ESPN. He essentially said, like, is this over? Are we done with the Greg Hardy experiment? Is it done? Hopefully it is. Sorry if you guys can hear my dog panting in the microphone because she's right next to the mic. But, yeah, Sergei looked good. Obviously, he's another guy that recently his biggest downfall was he fought a guy in Tom Aspinall who's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC and probably one of my favorites, like just in the heavyweight division. He's moves like a middleweight, super fast, great striking, good ground game. I can see him fighting for a title either before the year's over this year or sometime within the next calendar year, just because he is so good. And Sergei just went up against a guy who's just good. So if he could rattle off a couple more wins, have a couple more good performances, he'll be getting those big name fights like Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, Kyle Dawkins, all those guys. So good on Sergei, getting the job done. In the next fight, it was welterweight division. Kevin Holland making his welterweight debut against Alex Oliveira. And I have to say, Alex Oliveira looked so good in that first round. That first round, I had it 1-0, Alex. He was slipping shots. He just looked so clear-minded, and it didn't look like he should have been the underdog in that fight. He looked really good. And Kevin Holland, I think it was just a filling out process. It's hard when you're going down a weight class because obviously guys are going to be a little bit quicker. They're probably going to have a better gas tank because they're not carrying as much muscle. But Kevin was able to put it together. He got into a good rhythm in the second round and dropped Alex with just like a short check hook, like a right, and was able to finish him on the ground. Phenomenal absolutely phenomenal ground and pound with just like hammer fists, elbows, and was able to put Alex away. And it stinks to see because I like Alex Oliveira, but it's great to see Kevin Holland pick up a big win in his welterweight debut. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in the rankings because the welterweight division is extremely stacked with, obviously, we got Colby Covington, we got Kamaru Usman, we've got Jorge Masvidal, we've got Stephen Thompson, Vicente Luque, Michael Chiesa, Bilal Muhammad. There's so many guys that are in that 170 division that are really freaking good. And if I've missed anybody, I apologize. There's just so many fighters in the UFC, and there's so many guys in that top, 15 in the welterweight division that I could name. But those are some of the top guys that I could think of. But yeah, Kevin Holland, great performance. Congratulations to you on a big win, and hopefully you get another big name in your next fight. Another thing, Kevin Holland called out Cowboy Cerrone, so I don't know if that's going to happen because I think Cowboy's probably going to fight his last fight against Joe Lozon. That it's probably going to be like the end of it. At least for me, I hope it is. Same with Joe Lozon because Joe Lozon's up there in age as well. But more power to Kevin Holland for the call out. He said, I beat one Cowboy, I not beat another. So Donald Cerrone was in attendance. Maybe if he has a good enough performance against Joe Lozon, he'll be able to get one more fight and fight Kevin Holland. Highly doubt it, but never know. Next in the featherweight division, this was like the one fight that I picked wrong. Was at least for the main card, was Bryce Mitchell and Edson Barboza. Within the first 30 seconds of this fight, I said in the last episode that if Edson Barboza can really stay on the outside and pick Bryce apart with the leg kicks, then he'll be set. He'll be good. That's where he will control the fight. Just because anybody who pays attention to UFC, they know how dangerous Edson's kicks are. They're up there with freaking Junior Dos Santos, Justin Gaethje, just guys that can pick you apart with leg kicks, whether it's from the inside or the outside. And he landed 3 solid leg kicks within the first 30 seconds. And I was like, well, just what I said was going to happen. And then within another 30 seconds of that, he got taken down and got pummeled in the first. Then the same thing happened in the second round, and then the same thing happened in the third round. Bryce Mitchell's ground game was really good. His striking from in the guard or being on top was phenomenal. I think he landed 170-something ground strikes. He was 4 for 4 on his takedowns, and he had like 11 and a half or 12 minutes of control in a 15-minute fight, like ground control. And that's insane. That's Khabib-style shit. Or any Dagestani fighter. Islam Makhachev even, but they go for, they get finishes or TKOs. But Bryce looked super good in this fight. And I even posted on my Twitter, I have no issue with picking that fight wrong. Good for Bryce Mitchell. I like Bryce Mitchell. He's good. He's really good. And he's that backwoods boy from Arkansas that he just wants to get in there and fight. And obviously he's got this other spiritual stuff going on. Good for you. I'm not going to knock your belief system. If it's working for you, keep doing it, buddy. But Edson, I don't know if the cut to featherweight is too depleting on him. And his performances, obviously he looked really good against Shane Burgos, but he got absolutely whooped by Giga Chikadze. And then in this fight with Bryce Mitchell, it's like the guy who's got really good ground game. I mean, like I said in the last episode, most Brazilians have some sort of ground game with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you would have never known because he couldn't pass Bryce Mitchell. He couldn't get off his back. He was just stuck in guard all the time. And Bryce Mitchell was doing damage. Bryce Mitchell was landing a lot of shots, 170 plus. And his takedown defense was nowhere. Like, he just couldn't get away. So I think just that top pressure was exhausting. Cutting to 145 is probably really exhausting. So I don't know if he needs to go back to 155 or just take a break and try to analyze what he needs to do. But I don't think being at featherweight's really doing him any favors. So I think he needs to look into either going back up or just taking some time off to just get better in certain aspects of his game. After the fight, Bryce Mitchell said he was going to donate half of his purse to Children's Foundation in Arkansas. Like, maybe it was called the Arkansas Children's Foundation or whatever. And nice enough on Dana White. Dana said, you earned your money because Bryce just signed a contract extension. Dana said, you earned your money. Go ahead and I'll pay for that $45,000 in your name. And then Bryce Mitchell said, well, I'm trying to plant seeds and see how this thing grows. So he's giving back to the community. That's awesome on Bryce Mitchell. Really nice guy, really humble, farmer. So I think Embedded was really great for casual fans to get to see who Bryce Mitchell is and how he is. Only guy in the UFC that has camo shorts, like a camo fight kit. So good on him. Way to go, Bryce Mitchell. Congratulations on probably the biggest win of your career thus far. And let's see where this thing goes. Let's see where you can take this thing with your Twister self. In the co-main, it was Rafael dos Anjos versus Hinata Moicano. And this fight was there was some, I guess there was like kind of an uproar during this fight because people were upset that the ref didn't stop the fight. People were upset that Moicano's corner. That's enough. Come on. Come here. Sorry, guys. People were upset that Moicano's corner didn't throw the towel in because he was getting beaten to a pulp. RDA looked phenomenal. He looked really good. His striking was on point. His ground game was on point. His takedowns were on point. Obviously, I say they're on point. He was 5 for 15 on his takedown attempts, but still, he got 33%. Like, he was every third takedown he got. So it stinks for Hinata Mecano because he stepped in on short notice, and he is coming off of a great performance a couple weeks ago. But Moicano did have to cut significant amount of weight, I think 20 pounds in like 3 or 4 days, which isn't terrible, but it's also not great it's not great for your body. RDA, I really wish it would have been RDA versus Islam, but obviously it came out and Dana White reported that Islam's team and Islam rejected the fight at 170, even though RDA was like, all right, well, let's do it at 170, and they still backed out. So that's a fight I'd love to get. It's really turning into like a Khabib versus Tony Ferguson situation between RDA and Islam, but oh well, what you gonna do? Yeah, and I like to see where RDA goes from here, because I think in terms of the 155-pound division, I think he could get back to a lightweight title. I really think he could. I don't know if he'd win it, but I think he could get there. He's got to fight some guys like, Justin Gaethje or Michael Chandler or Dustin Poirier. If Dustin Poirier ends up going to 170, then I guess it's kind of out the window. But there's fights there that he's gonna have to take. He's gonna have to get some big name wins, but anything can happen. It's the fun about MMA is that any given Sunday anybody can be beaten or anybody could get beat. So kudos to RDA, fantastic performance. Kudos to Moicano. He gained a fan in me. I wasn't like the biggest Hinata Moicano fan, but after that and his display, his ability to withstand the storm, essentially he got It looked like he got hit by a fucking Mack truck, is what it looked like. It was bad. It was really bad. His face was beaten up pretty good. His freaking nose was busted. His eye was, closed shut. Early in the fight, like in the second round, I think, second or third, and it was a 5-round fight, which I didn't even understand why the hell they made that a 5-round fight. I get it. He was supposed to fight Rafael Fiziev, RDA was, and that was supposed to be a main event on the fight or on a fight night card. So they made it a 5-round fight. But after that fell through, I don't know why they kept it a 5-round fight. That didn't make any sense to me. It's like Hinata Mecano was trained for a 3-round fight in his last one with Alexander Hernandez, and then he steps in on short notice, and then it's a 5-round fight. So kudos to him for doing that. But he could have saved himself a lot of damage and a lot of head trauma if he would have just taken a 3-round fight. Hopefully he got paid handsomely. He had moments there in the 5th round, which I would say probably the 5th round was his best round. He looked really good in the 5th round, but it was just he took too much damage, and RDA took some big shots, but he didn't waver. He returned fire, and I think in the 4th or 5th round, or both rounds, I think he kind of treated it like a sparring session where I don't think he really wanted to do like a lot of damage to Moicano. I think he just wanted to, piece him up a little bit and then get out of there, like make it through. And then in the 5th round, when Moicano started throwing just bombs, he was like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna return fire then, because I'm not getting put away since I've been controlling this whole fight. So yeah, congrats RDA on another big win. I think he's one of like 7 or 8 fighters now in the UFC that have broken the 20 win in the UFC. If I can I even name them all? So there's Michael Bisping, GSP, Charles Oliveira, Andre Arlovsky, Cowboy Cerrone, unless I already said Cowboy Cerrone, RDA, and then there's a couple others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, so he's joining a very high list, so kudos to him. And then the main event was Colby Covington versus Jorge Gamebrad Mosfidal. This one, it's like I said, I was kind of torn in my pick last time, simply because I could see it where Mosfidal he might have done some crazy shit where his strike, like maybe his wrestling just got like significantly better, or if he throws a fucking flying knee or something within the first 10 seconds and knocks Colby out. And he tried to right off the bat. He did like a running, jumping front kick and missed, like just absolutely whiffed. In the first round, Colby went in. He went for a strike and he poked Jorge in the eye, and then Jorge backed up and he was like, "You fucking poked me in the eye." So then Colby capitalized on that because Herb didn't see it, Herb Dean, and he was able to secure a takedown, lots of ground control. He landed a shitload of strikes. Like, yeah, it was 218 to 90 overall. Colby was 6 for 15 on his takedowns. He got a submission attempt, didn't get it, obviously. But he pushed the pressure on Jorge, and it's kind of like what I thought was going to happen, where it's just going to be volume, lots of strikes. He's not going to do significant damage. Jorge wasn't in danger at any point. Like, he just wasn't. But Colby worked his ass for, 4 rounds and then ended up getting clipped. He got caught. Jorge caught him with a shot and dropped him, and Colby recovered really quickly. Later on, Colby said, "Oh, I wasn't hurt. I tripped, all this other shit." That's just, his narrative that he wants to push. So, kudos to you, Colby. I mean, if it's working for you, then it works for you. But you got caught and you got clipped. The biggest thing was when he got clipped, Jorge was I think what happened is Jorge was just so fucking tired from getting wrestled into oblivion that he couldn't push the pace because he was exhausted. He clipped him, and then he wasn't really able to do anything because he just was so fucking tired. And it was just more of the same for the rest of the fight. Like, Jorge had moments. He had good moments with leg kicks and stuff, and some decent body shots, like body kicks. But Colby withstood the storm, and he was able to get like I said, he got 6 takedowns. He had a lot of ground time control, and he made it look easy. Obviously got caught, like I said, but other than that, he was on his back. He was making Jorge carry his weight, which is what he did. Actually, that's what he does in most of his fights. You look what he did to Tyron Woodley. You look what he did to Robbie Lawler. And it's volume punches. It has nothing. He doesn't throw a lot of power. He doesn't deplete his gas tank. It's just punches and bunches, lots of volume, feel the pressure, get you up against the cage, and then take you down. And I think that was the biggest mistake that Jorge made, is Jorge was backed up against the cage a lot of the time, which is why he got taken down. It didn't have anything really to do with, his takedown defense. I mean, he was able to stop nine attempts. It's the fact that when he did get taken down, it's because his back was against the cage and he was in a terrible position and he was just so fucking tired. So after the fight, I'll speak about Jorge first. Jorge said that he, was just too flat-footed. His takedown defense wasn't good enough. His wrestling wasn't on point, so he needed to get back to that. I think another thing is his gas tank is just not where it needs to be competing in those high-level fights. The guy just signed the 3rd most lucrative deal in UFC history behind Conor McGregor and Israel Adesanya. And if that's what you're paying for as the UFC, I think you would like to see more. Like, yeah, he's a pay-per-view draw. That's awesome. But at the same time, if you're a pay-per-view draw and you're not winning fights, eventually you're not going to be a draw anymore because people are going to be tired of watching you lose. So if people just do what Colby did, or what Kamaru did in the first fight, and I know it's completely different because Jorge took the fight on short notice in their first fight with Kamaru Usman, had to fly overseas, had to cut weight and do all this other shit while he was getting ready for a short notice fight. But he was just too tired, and wrestling and being up against the cage and getting foot stomped and doing, knees to the legs and shit. It took its toll, and Jorge was just too tired. And then in the second fight with Usman, we didn't get to really see much in terms. It didn't go long enough because I think Kamaru knocked him out in the second round. So definitely something. Obviously, I'm not a professional. I've never fought MMA, but just from my perspective, I think working on your cardio, which is going to be harder to do at 37 years of age, and working on your wrestling, which you can't just develop great wrestling overnight. That's something that takes all these guys years and years of practice. You look at Colby's been doing it since he was 6 years old. You look at Kamaru's been doing it for years and years and years. You look at Ben Askren, who did it his whole life. All these guys that are phenomenal wrestlers have been doing it all their life. So obviously you can practice and you can bring all the best training partners that are wrestlers in the world, and it's not really going to mean anything until you've had that time to really utilize it and put it into motion in a fight, which obviously Jorge didn't really get a chance to show his takedown defense because he fought a guy who is just a wrestler and a grinder, and that's what he does. Colby, after the fight, I think Colby knows that after losing twice to Kamaru and Kamaru being out with his hand injury, and then he's more than likely going to fight Leon Edwards next. It's kind of like who is there for him, and he called out Dustin Poirier because Dustin Poirier was talking about making a move up to 170. So that'd be an entertaining one. He talked about how it's on site and all this other shit, and so who knows? That could be a fun one. I think Colby would win that fight just because he's naturally a 170er, and Dustin's been fighting at 155, and I think the wrestling would really come in like strong, because I think Jorge's just as dangerous of a striker as Dustin. Maybe not as crisp and precise, but in terms of like knockout power, I think they're on the same level. And I just don't think Colby would allow himself to be in positions where he could get hit. He's just too good. Yeah, so Colby Covington versus Dustin Poirier is something that Colby wants. I think after that, if that fight doesn't come to fruition, then Colby should fight whoever wins out of Khamzat Chimaev and Gilbert Burns, because that fight was announced for, I think, UFC 274. Is that right? UFC... I want to say that's what it is scheduled for, is UFC 274. I don't even fucking know. Anyways, either way, that's going to be a fun one. I'm glad that that came to fruition. Yeah, so let me know who you guys had picked for your fights, because in the comment section below if you're on YouTube. And yeah, because I'm interested to see what your guys' takes were. I want to know what your guys' thoughts were on the fight card and who you think. Like, I don't even know who Jorge should fight next. I would love if Leon loses to Kamaru. I'd love to see Leon versus Jorge, just so that they can get that fight from a couple years ago, like where they were backstage and Jorge gave him a 3-piece and a soda. I'd like to see that one, just because it'd be interesting to see if Jorge can still hang in that top 4, top 5. Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at next week's fight card, which is Thiago Santos versus Magomed Ankalaev. On this fight card, we have... Let's see if there's anybody of big name in the preliminary cards. Okay. We've got Trevin Jones, Chris Moutinho, who obviously lost to Sugar Sean O'Malley. He's going to be fighting on the preliminary card. J.J. Aldrich versus Jillian Robertson is another good one. And then on the main card, you've got Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva. That's going to be a fun fight. Drew Dober versus Terrence McKinney. Terrence McKinney's stepping in on short notice after his finish last week, I think. So he's stepping in on short notice against Drew Dober. Khalil Roundtree versus Carl Roberson is going to be a fun one. Sadiq Youssef versus Alex Caceres. Marlon Moraes versus Song Yadong. And then Thiago Santos versus Magomed Ankalaev is the headliner. So this is a lot of fun. This fight card looks stacked for a fight night card. And I'm pumped to see it. I hope it's going to be a good one. I hope it's not a stinker. And then after that, the fight night card is going to be Alexander Volkov versus Tom Aspinall. And that's going to be the one that's, I think, in London. Or it's in England. It should be in England. So I think that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, make sure to, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. Let me know what your guys' thoughts were on UFC 272. If there's anything that you'd like me to talk about in future videos, then please comment that down below on YouTube. Podcast, make sure to tune in, check out the podcast on all podcast platforms. There's all kinds of them. And then, again, hit that notification bell so you can see when our videos go live. That's going to do it for me. Hope you enjoyed. Till next time, peace. Talk to you guys later.